Well, where do I start? Last night was huge. I thought it went very well for Trump. Like I predicted, the mics being shut off, I think helped him a ton. It made him be way more disciplined. He came across very well, I think. Some people maybe would not be, happy that he's not as combative. But I don't think that he came across as meek, certainly. I think he was still assertive, kind of like Pence was, but in a more measured way. Now, starting with the bad, though, or other than that, the one thing that I said yesterday that I really thought I wanted Trump to hammer home is that Biden, his whole corruption scandal that's coming out now, it's not corrupt like Hillary was corrupt, to where Hillary was just taking money from a bunch of people like, Saudi Arabia or Wall Street and giving these speeches. I mean, with Joe Biden here and Hunter Biden, it was something much more sinister, and it looked, based on what this whistleblower, Bob Alinsky, who Trump invited to the debate, what he was saying essentially is that Joe Biden was a paid Chinese asset. That's why Hunter Biden was getting that money. It was very clearly about buying influence with Joe Biden. And that's a very big deal. If you have someone running for president who is, bought and paid for by the Chinese government. And I don't think that Trump did nearly as good of a job as he should have making that clear. I think, he mentioned it a couple times, but if you're someone who wasn't, who's not familiar with the details of the story, I don't think that Trump did a good job getting that across because, of course, the moderator constantly talked over him and tried to shut him up anytime he brought it up. And the moderator herself would never ask a question about this kind of a massive scandal. But issue to issue, I thought Trump handled himself well. He had good points. And I thought Joe Biden actually, a lot of people disagree, but they say he looked bad. But from what I could hear, because I tend to listen to debates more than watch them, I thought Joe Biden seemed like he held himself together pretty well. He gave answers. I might not like the answers, but he gave answers. He sounded like he was coherent. He was, of course, incredibly negative early on compared to Trump, who sounded more positive. I mean, that is a tactic. I don't know necessarily that trying to be the negative candidate is, the doomsayer is such a great strategy. But I can't say for sure. So I'm going to just leave it at that. The highlight, however, that I'm trying to speed through everything else to get to is really what made the night. And it wasn't some zinger that Trump shot off at Biden. It was a self-inflicted wound on Biden's part. And that was when he said that, we're going to move away from the oil industry or phase out fossil fuels, this kind of line that we've heard time and time again, because getting rid of oil and getting rid of fossil fuels is insane, can't be done. That was, sort of the most pie-in-the-sky, absurd goal of the Green New Deal. If you look at how much energy is produced by oil and other fossil fuels, we do not have, a renewable source of energy, unless maybe you say nuclear, that could replace all of that. You say, oh, well, yeah, you can, but they'd be more expensive. Well, if something costs more, that means it's using real resources. It's not just green pieces of paper that it costs real productive, capacity. So if you have a more expensive, a more scarce, a less cost-effective source of energy, well, then you're not going to be able to produce as much energy, which means that you are not going to be able to produce as many things in the economy, period. So, so that's a very crazy claim. And so it's not something that I would expect a general election candidate to ever say. Sure, it's one of the nutty things you can say during a Democratic primary because there are these ridiculous environmentalists who think that that's possible, in the next few years to just get rid of fossil fuels, even though it would create such an economic catastrophe that would kill millions of people. No joke. Joe Biden, however, slipped up. And Trump got him to actually admit it. He got Biden to say that we're going to phase out the oil industry. We're going to move away from the oil industry, and Trump immediately, to his credit, when Biden said that, he said, oh, that's a big statement, Joe. And Joe, he followed up. He said, yeah, it's a big statement. And he said, yeah, did you hear that, Texas? Did you hear that, Oklahoma? Did you hear that, Pennsylvania? Yeah, and that's right. Pennsylvania and Ohio, I think after that, Trump was already going to win Ohio, but he's going to win it by bigger margins now, probably, because of what Joe Biden said there, because well, I mean, the oil industry was born in Ohio. That's where the Rockefellers are from. But fracking is still important there. And of course, Western Pennsylvania, lots of fracking going on there. A lot of people who rely on that for their livelihood. I mean, Trump was already going to win that part of Pennsylvania anyway, but the people there who were still supporting Biden, they're going to be reconsidering that after what Biden said last night, because Biden just threatened the livelihood of everyone in the oil industry. Said we're moving away from that. We're going to phase it out. And then, of course, Trump immediately came out with his ad with all the compilation of all the times that Trump said, or that Biden and Harris said, you know, we're going to ban fossil fuels. We're going to do all these things. We're going to get rid of it. And that's not the kind of thing you want going in the last week of the election. We've got, you know, less than a week and a half to go until Election Day. And especially, you know, when it's something that is a big issue in the tipping point state, Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania was something that I thought, you know, I was thinking it didn't look too good for Trump anymore, considering he already was, you know, he didn't have a lead in anything that I saw in Pennsylvania. It looked like it was going to be an uphill battle for him there. And then that Supreme Court decision where John Roberts said that Philadelphia can keep counting votes for another 3 days. I said, oh, that's... Trump's done there. He can't win. Because even if he wins with a small margin, Philadelphia will erase that and invent a bunch of fake votes in those 3 days after the election. But now, with what Biden just said, if there was a chance that Trump was going to win Pennsylvania with a small lead before, that lead just increased. And if it's sufficiently large, Philadelphia is not going to be able to create enough fake votes to overwhelm that, or else they'll just expose themselves for for creating fraudulent votes if they just create, 50,000 or 100,000 votes out of thin air. And so Joe Biden really, really hurt himself last night. I think that he was already, not in. I still thought that he had a very, very good shot winning, but I didn't think that he had this amazing insurmountable lead, of course, that the media would have you believe. So now I think that there's a chance that Trump wins. Let's say Trump wins Pennsylvania now because of this whole issue. But the voter fraud in the 3 days afterwards brings up the vote tally very, very close. And let's say Trump is still ahead. If they're able to fake enough votes to make it close, then what you're going to have is an incredible legal fight, just like Bush v. Gore 2000, where the Biden campaign is going to come in, call for recounts because it's close. They're going to keep looking for votes here and here. You're going to have all these lawsuits over the naked ballots that were thrown out. Naked ballots, if you don't know, in Pennsylvania, you have to mail your ballot in if you're doing a mail-in ballot in 2 envelopes. One envelope that's completely unmarked, and then another one that has your your information on it. And the idea is that once they mail it in, once it gets there, they can take it out of the envelope that has your name on it, and then just have a ballot with no information on it, so that it can't be tied back to you, so that the ballot truly is anonymous. As of right now, if you mail in your ballot without that blank envelope, in the outer envelope, your ballot is going to get thrown out. And of course, since mail-in ballots are advantage Dems, those ballots that are being thrown out are going to be more often than not ballots voting for Joe Biden over Donald Trump. And so if Trump wins Pennsylvania, the Biden campaign is going to sue to have the naked ballots counted. And there's going to be, because I think, it's hundreds of thousands, I think, already that have been thrown out, naked ballots, or at least that are projected to be thrown out. So that would be plenty if it's a close race to flip things Biden's way. And so you're going to have potentially now quite a bit of unrest unless Trump is able to win without Pennsylvania. Let's say he's able to pull off winning Pennsylvania and Michigan. Well, then if he loses Pennsylvania, he would still win. Pennsylvania would not be a tipping point state. It wouldn't really make sense. Even if they were to overturn his victory in Pennsylvania, he'd still be president, because with Florida, Arizona, and North Carolina, which all would go Trump before Pennsylvania or Michigan, I don't see that there's a scenario that Trump wins Pennsylvania or Michigan without winning North Carolina, Florida, and Arizona. I believe his total is 258, and then if you add with Florida, Arizona, and North Carolina. If you add Pennsylvania, that alone, that would come to 278, which Trump could win with that. But if he still has Michigan too, well then if he loses Pennsylvania, Michigan would give him the votes he needs. Then put him at 274, so he could afford to lose Pennsylvania then, if it's stolen from him. And then also another very bad scenario, let's say Trump wins Pennsylvania and Wisconsin or Minnesota and Maine's second congressional district. Pennsylvania's close. The Biden campaign sues. Pennsylvania results are overturned. Then we're in real bad shape, because then what all that'll do, that won't give Biden a victory. It won't still leave Trump with a majority. They'll be tied at 269 each, which again would be very, very bad. But it's a scenario that, as long as everything goes as expected, and we don't have some kind of crazy unrest in the streets, which we're probably going to have crazy unrest in the streets if there's a tied electoral college. Republicans control a majority of House state delegations, meaning that of U.S. House state delegations, I should say. I'm not talking about the actual state the state House of Representatives in the 50 states. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the U.S. House of Representatives. Majority of state delegations within the U.S. House of Representatives are controlled by Republicans. Each state delegation gets one vote. There's 50 votes if there's a tie in the Electoral College, and that means that the Republicans would win if there's a tie in the Electoral College. But that, of course, would be a very bad scenario, because then you have a president who didn't win a majority of the Electoral College, didn't win majority of the popular vote. It's going to look, Trump is going to have a tenuous grip on power at that point, and there's going to be a lot of unrest, I would think. So with less than a week until the election, things are getting very exciting, and I'm seeing a lot. As you can probably tell, I've got a lot of scenarios going in my head of how things could turn out election day and the weeks after. And I hope things go well and smoothly. But I mean, there's a big chance that we have a pretty bad scenario. And frankly, you can make the case that there's going to be pretty bad unrest, even if Trump wins decisively. Because as I said in a video a couple weeks ago, the polls, being so ridiculously in favor of Biden, are they're conditioning people to freak out if Trump wins, especially if Trump wins by a decent margin, like let's say by the same that he won last time, over 300 electoral votes. People are not ready for that, because the polls have shown Biden, double digits ahead of Trump in a bunch of important big swing states. If Trump comes back from behind, supposedly, even though I don't think he was that far behind to begin with, and wins, these people will think that it was rigged. They will believe the polls, I think, more than the election results in a lot of cases. Because, a lot of these people, I mean, polling in America is a cult. These people think that Nate Silver is a god, and that he divines, who's going to be the next president. And that if Nate Silver's wrong, he's not wrong. The election was wrong. Boy, I know I'm all over the place today, but I mean, really, last night went much better than I would have expected. I expected it to be a wash at best. I was not expecting Joe Biden to really come out and shoot himself in the foot like he did. And it wasn't that he had a senior moment, really. I mean, that wasn't him just standing up, although he did have one moment where he just stood up there, saying nothing, like he gave a one-word response to a question, and then he just 5 seconds of awkward silence, and then he went, "That's my answer." That was a little awkward. But this was not that kind of issue to where Joe Biden just stands up there and he looks like he can't, he's not a functioning person. He stood up there and he looks like he's a functioning person who wants to functionally make my job obsolete. That's how a lot of people are going to take that. And Trump needs to make sure that everyone involved in that industry in the state of Pennsylvania, or the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, they need to know exactly, what he said. I mean, this is going to help him more than the corruption stuff could have. Even if Trump had been as effective as I wanted him to be, although, like I said, I didn't have a ton of confidence that he could be that effective. It's tough to do, when you're working against, Biden and the moderator. It's going to be tough to try and get that across, even if he had been as effective in making people realize that Biden is corrupt. I don't think that it would have been as good for him as what we saw last night. So with that said, if you get anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe, because I do upload every day and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.